Welcome to Bunny Trails, a whimsical adventure of idioms and other turns of phrase. I'm Shauna Harrison.
And I'm Dan Pugh. Each week, we take an idiom or other turn of phrase and try to tell the story from its entry into the English language to how it's used today. Have you ever met a person who is always focused on doing the right thing? That sounds like such a great virtue, but sometimes you just want to bend the rules just a little bit. But no, they're not going to allow it. No fun for you. All because of little Goody Two Shoes.
I'm excited to learn about this one, I guess. I have no idea where it came from.
Well, according to the Oxford English Dictionary, Goody Two Shoes means, quote, a person who is always perfectly well behaved, and later used frequently with the implication of a degree of smugness or disapproval of the behaviors of others, also known as a goody-goody, end quote. So we're not going to go down the goody-goody route because that could be a whole other episode itself, but we are going to follow the Goody Two Shoes side of this. And as with many of our phrases, this one has been through quite a journey. We're going to start in the late 1500s, when goody was shorthand for good wife. So a good wife or a goody was a married woman of, let's say, humble status, usually a lower socioeconomic status. And actually, there's a masculine version for that too. Goodman is the same. So it was good wife or goodman, but the goody really got shortened for good wife, and goodman was just used for men.
Okay.
So this establishes the goody part, right? But not necessarily the two shoes part, and there doesn't seem to be a good answer for that one.
Okay.
One could argue that it might simply be a term to fit the meter of a poem, but when you know that the male equivalent was being used, Goodman Two Shoes was being used in the same time frame as this poem I'm about to read, it really calls this into question. So it could just be a meter type of thing, but it seems like there must be more to it, and we just don't have enough digitized works to be able to find that just yet. So maybe someday there's like a whole library of old works that haven't been digitized, and hopefully one of them is going to hold the answer to that. But we're going to start with our 1670 poem, A Voyage to Ireland in Burlesque by Charles Cotton. And this is the first time I could find the phrase in print. It was used to refer to a woman, Mistress Mayrus, who is at a fancy dinner and complains about the food. Quote, when straight, with the look and the tone of a scold, Mistress Mayrus complained that the pottage was cold. And all long of your fiddle-faddle, quoth she, why, what then, Goody Two Shoes, what if it be? Hold you, if you can, your tittle-tattle, quoth he. End quote. So here the phrase is being used as an insult to the mistress, who is of a lower class and, at least in the eyes of the hosts, should not be complaining. And that makes sense if we're using goody as a good wife, right? Someone of a lower socioeconomic status, right? So that this makes sense here, right? And I don't think there's any sort of an issues there. So that is what then leads to this definition from the Oxford English Dictionary for Goody Two Shoes of that time frame, which is, quote, a title for or a form of address to a woman, suggesting that she is of lower social status or has the manners, taste, or opinions supposedly typical of the lower classes, end quote. And the male equivalent, as I mentioned earlier, was Goodman Two Shoes, which shows up in a 1673 work by John Eachard. So we see right here in the 1670s that they were definitely, this phrase was circulating in among those who were writing things down. Again, unclear how the two shoes part got added, but that almost certainly influenced the next work, which brings about a change in the term to something more like what we know today. The History of Little Goody Two Shoes was published in 1765, though the author is unclear and disputed. Here is a brief note about the title character from the Oxford English Dictionary. Quote, Goody Two Shoes was the nickname given to the heroine of The History of Little Goody Two Shoes, a popular children's story in which Marjorie Meanwell, an orphan girl, triumphs over adversity through her own unwavering virtue and hard work to become a teacher and marry a rich man, using her newfound wealth to help the poor and do good works, end quote.
Hmm.
So in the book, it explains that Miss Meanwell only had one shoe. She was in a bad situation. Her dad had been framed, and then he died, and now she's an orphan. And this nice person took pity on her and gifted her a pair of shoes, right? And so then she was so excited, she ran around the town yelling, "Look, 2 shoes!" And from the book here, quote, "And so she behaved to all the people she met, and by that means obtained the name Goody Two Shoes, though her playmates called her Old Goody Two Shoes," end quote. Now,
Okay.
we'll jump more into this groundbreaking book in our behind the scenes video, which is available every Friday on Patreon. That's patreon.com/bunnytrailspod. So this work here is almost certainly the catalyst for the phrase shifting from someone of a lower class, in this case an orphan girl, to someone who does good works, as she is known for by the end of the story. This is almost always cited as the origin of the phrase, but we saw the term used 100 years before this book was published. However, the work is an important waypoint from its origins to how it is today. And I think it would be fair to say that we would not still have this phrase today if it wasn't for this book. But the definition shift from a person who does good things to how it is used today still has a little distance to travel. And because nothing pure and sweet can last in this world, it seems, at some point the phrase took on a frequent air of disapproval for the person who was the Goody Two Shoes. And one of the first times I found the phrase being used in a derogatory way was in The Satirist, a monthly periodical dated 1809. So this was within 50 years. It had already, this popular children's story, a nursery rhyme, basically, a fairy tale. And this story had, everybody knows who Goody Two Shoes is, and she does all these good things. But at some point, we started using that as if it were a negative here. And the story that I found it was in volume 4 of The Satirist, and it has a date of January 1st, 1809, and it's called The Satirist and Pickpockets. We're about 12 pages in to find the quote, which is only one sentence, but I'm going to read about half of the sentence, so I need to take a deep breath. Quote, "Mr. Soames expressed his gratitude by a graceful bow, to increase the effect of which he imprudently withdrew his hand from the pocket which contained the spoil of the evening, and was consequently re-robbed by a particular friend of Mr. Peter Finnerty's. This circumstance having been secretly communicated to the chairman, he very properly determined that Mr. Soames ought to have another opportunity of adding to their common stock, and therefore requested Mr. O'Gorman, in a whisper, to kick up a row, by knocking down an old woman who stood near him. Mr. O'Gorman, having minutely scanned the devoted fair one, and discovered her to be extremely weak and diminutive, magnanimously complied, and Goody Two Shoes was felled to the ground." End quote.
Okay. I'm sorry. So they're like, start a fight by pushing down an old lady?
Yeah, well, no, it was a distraction. So he's kicking up a row, right? He's causing a scene,
Yeah.
and because they were trying to pickpocket people, and they almost got busted, and so this guy knocks down an old lady to continue to cause a scene so that they could end up. And the sentence continues on, and basically details all the things that they were able to pickpocket from people during the ensuing chaos.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. Yeah. So this poor lady was just standing there, right? And she wasn't doing anything wrong. She just was just a nice old lady, right? But then they were using it in a disgust way, because it's satire, obviously. So they're using it almost in a disgust way because she represents the opposite of what they are.
Right. Yeah.
Here's another example of the phrase being used not in a positive way, and it's from The Standard out of London and is dated September 16th, 1833. This comes from an article that is focused on the powerful Grey family and how all the brothers are being appointed to important roles, being granted important titles, and given important awards, in spite of them being unqualified and unworthy. It's nepotism, as we use the word now, at its finest. And it isn't new. The whole article is a complaint, and here's one sentence that uses our phrase, quote, "We do not mention Lord Howick, who was Under Secretary of the State while Goody Two Shoes affected to be mistress of the department, because, like Lord Durham, it was found that his temper would not suit. But there he was." end quote.
Okay.
So in this case, we don't know who the author is referencing as Goody Two Shoes. I probably could have spent 4 hours just trying to track that down at the time. But the entire tone of the article is clear. This is not a compliment for this particular woman.
Yeah.
During the mid-1800s and well into the 1900s, I found several examples of plays, pantomimes, and parodies being performed throughout the United Kingdom and the United States, which were either titled Goody Two Shoes or featured a character named Goody Two Shoes. And the reason I think this is important because this is running for 100 years here where these things are happening, and they're in tons of these newspapers, and it really helps to show how the term had staying power to continue to be something that could even become idiomatic. So everyone who was anyone either knew of the children's story or had heard the name or the phrase through these performances that were advertised in newspapers across the English-speaking world. And to give you an example of how well known it was, I'm going to read an advert from the Glasgow Evening News, which is out of Scotland, and it's dated December 20th, 1890. Quote, Goody Two Shoes surpasses all and everything. Time and prices as usual. Seats booked at Adams, 83 Buchanan Street. End quote. That's it. That's the whole ad. That's the whole ad.
There you go.
They didn't even have to say it was a play. You know, they didn't have to say. Everyone already knew it was a performance of the play based off the book because it was so frequent during that time frame. And tons of the advertisements in the United Kingdom and the United States were like that. They just a quick mention, Goody Two Shoes, you know, or whatever, and wherever you got, you know, wherever you get your seats. So, yeah, it was wild to see that, and it'd be like something now where you think if you listen to a podcast now about say COVID, for example, and they'll, you know, they may say something instead of naming it by name, they may just say, oh, you know, the issues today, right?
Mm-hmm.
But, you know, 15 years from now, does somebody know what those issues are? With COVID, maybe, but, you know, here they didn't have to describe it because everyone of the day knew what it was. And I was shocked to find that this was such a long stretch where this kept being commented in British newspapers and in United States newspapers and in, you know, expanded newspapers of everywhere in the English-speaking world.
Yeah, that's really interesting.
Yeah. So while the book wasn't the origin of the phrase, it is almost certainly the reason the phrase still exists today, because that book and that story gave rise to all of these offshoots of the story, and that just continued on into the mid-1900s. Next up, we have several modern uses to cover, and we'll get to those right after we say thank you to our sponsors.
This episode is brought to you by our amazing patrons on Patreon, and it is 100% free to join the Bunny Trails community. So give our weekly discussions and poll questions a try. And if you love the content and want more of it, we have some paid tiers too if you have a few dollars to spare each month and want to support the show.
We have new things every weekday on the feeds. In addition to the conversation about what movies, shows, books, and podcasts everyone is enjoying, and our weekly poll questions, we also have early access to the week's podcast, all the links, books, songs, and other content mentioned in the week's episode, and our lightly edited behind-the-scenes video featuring all of the cut content, goofs, and bonus facts that didn't make it into the podcast feed.
We've also got original digital artwork every month made by me and direct access to talk with us. No nefarious social media algorithms getting in the way of what we see or don't see. Plus, you can get awesome name recognition like Pat Rowe and JGP do every episode. And our top spot is currently occupied by the amazing Mary Halsey Lopez. You can join the Bunny Trails community for free at Bunny Trails Pod on Patreon. That's patreon.com/bunnytrailspod.
We're going to open with the 1982 song Goody Two Shoes by Adam Ant. Here's the chorus, followed by the bridge to another verse. Quote, Goody two, goody two, goody goody two shoes. Goody two, goody two, goody goody two shoes. Don't drink, don't smoke, what do you do? You don't drink, don't smoke, what do you do? Subtle innuendos follow, must be something inside. No one's gonna tell me what's wrong and what's right, or tell me who to eat with, sleep with, or that I've won the big fight, end quote. It is really hard not to sing
That's
when you're
such a
doing that.
catchy
But
song too.
it is such a catchy song, and even if you've never paid attention to the lyrics, the just the cadence probably will identify it for you if you listen to the songs of the '80s, especially British stuff. And this is one of those songs that had a music video, so it popped up in early MTV days, and was a staple of the time frame, as many British songs were, since they were already making music videos in in England prior to the United States taking on that trend. So, which is why we had the second British invasion of all of these British acts in the '80s with MTV. If you
thank
didn't know that,
goodness.
there you go. Look, another tidbit of information for you.
Random fact.
Random fact. Yeah, it's a twofer here. Goody Two Shoes is a 1984 British short film written and directed by Ian Eames that was nominated for an Oscar for Best Live Action Short Film. Here's the synopsis from Letterboxd. Quote, a teacher volunteers a group of misfit students to take a new dance class, including a Goody Two Shoes and his bully. Awkwardness, friendship, competition, and romance follows. End quote. I feel like this one's got everything. It's got dance, and it's got the romance piece, and it's like, oh yeah. So it's like you've got Goody Two Shoes, both from the Goody Two Shoes of the person, but they're also dancing too. So there's also the the shoes element, the two shoes.
Yeah. I think this is so fun because it's like you can do so many different play on words with this phrase that.
Yeah, exactly. Little Goody Two Shoes is a 1987 song by Elvis Costello. Here's the first verse and the chorus. Quote, you can take a powder, you can take a drink. You can keep the shrink and the kitchen sink. Can write my name in heaven in invisible ink. Just leave it, baby, when there's no time to think. Little Goody Two Shoes is here to clinch. You can miss me by a mile or you can miss me by an inch. Don't move a muscle, baby. Don't even flinch, or little Goody Two Shoes will feel the pinch. End quote.
Oh, okay.
The 80s had a definite highlight there. In the 90s, we saw a lot of episodes of popular TV shows which played off of a trope of having a little Goody Two Shoes. I remember an episode of like Family Matters where Laura, who was kind of the Goody Two Shoes of the group, goes to a party and then starts drinking, and then Urkel has to come and save her, gallantly saving the day. Urkel, if you are not familiar, just look up the phrase Urkel with Jaleel White's character, and it's just what a great, hilarious, very recognizable character. But anyway, that was a common thing in so many TV shows in the 90s. But there weren't a lot of works that were titled with that.
Yeah.
But that started to change again in the 2000s and especially into the 2020s. So we're going to look at a couple from that time frame. The 2023 work, The Tropeaholic's Guide to Internal Romance Tropes by Cindy Dees, is a book that analyzes the major tropes used in modern commercial fiction. So in the section I want to highlight, she describes some failures when creating a Goody Two Shoes trope. Quote, creating a character so self-righteous that the reader hates them. Creating a character who is so rigid in their values that they're unlikable. This rigidity can also make plotting very difficult. What are the moral dilemmas, the mistakes, the false beliefs in a character who is utterly determined to stay exactly as they are and convinced they are absolutely right at all times? End quote. I really like these descriptions because they help us understand exactly why we might call someone a Goody Two Shoes in the first place. Either they're self-righteous or they're unlikable due to their moral rigidity, right?
I think that is interesting because some of these like popular characters that I can think of that were, whether they were specifically referred to as Goody Two Shoes or that just in my mind, that was the way it, the kind of the character they played. It was in essence, that was kind of their downfall at a certain point. Not necessarily entirely, but
Right.
but it had some sort of a, there's some sort of hiccup that's being caused by them being so rigid in their ideals.
Yeah, exactly. And like she highlights here, for this trope to work, if you're going to have a Goody Two Shoes character, people can only really tie into them if they're still learning to be done, right? They have to grow as a character. Nobody wants to hear about a character who's already perfect, and everything is great, right? That's a at best somebody who pops in for a few minutes and then leaves, and everybody's like, oh, we're aspiring to be him or whatever, but they're not going to be a main character, right?
Right.
Or if they are, they're going to become the bad guy.
Yeah.
for exactly these self-righteousness or moral rigidity reasons. Little Goody Two Shoes is a video game in the RPG Maker style horror genre. It was developed by Astral Shift and published by Square Enix Collective. It was released on Steam in 2023. Here's the synopsis from the Square Enix website. Quote, "There once was Elise, a vibrant and ambitious young lass with a big dream, becoming filthy rich. In spite of this, the stars didn't seem to have reserved our protagonist much fortune in life. Elise, who came from humble beginnings, had no choice but to spend her days away assisting her fellow neighbors with menial tasks to make a living. One day, Elsie discovers a pair of beautiful, shiny red shoes buried in her backyard. What a surprise! Bewitched, Elsie embarks on a fearful journey that pulls her closer and closer into the heart of the mysterious woods. Will Elsie risk it all for the sake of a dream come true, or settle for her humble day-to-day life? The ending of this tale is yours to write." End quote.
Interesting.
It is, because I love it can go either way here, right? So she's a Goody Two Shoes, and she can go the character of the fairy tale route if you want, as the person portraying this character. You can go the little Goody Two Shoes route, or you can go the route of how we use the phrase today in a lot of ways, with that negative connotation where that she's smug and she's going these things, and it leads to her own downfall.
Yeah. Interesting.
Right. I also got a lot of vibes of, because they're these ruby shoes, I got these vibes of not Wizard of Oz. I know that might come up in somebody's head, but of Little Red Riding Hood, because of the clothing she wears and going into the mysterious woods, and so like I got a little bit of vibes of Little Red Riding Hood, as part of this. In the 2024 work Just Wonder: Shifting Perspectives in Tradition, editors Pauline Greenhill and Jennifer Orme address crucial themes in social and ecological justice efforts. Quote, "Despite Marjorie's moral heroism and model contribution to the public good, a Goody Two Shoes today is an idiom for a person with an ambiguous relationship to virtue and agency. The expression is profusely applied in tabloid journalism and commentary about stars and celebrities, and relates to perceived dissonances between their public personas and private lives, or their stances on public cases." End quote. I really appreciated this definition, with the recognition of an unclear relationship ambiguity between what a celebrity values and how they are seen by the public. And the parasocial relationships that people form with celebrities that have happened for a very long time, but there's so much more access today that they're even more predominant now. But that can make that dissonance, the appearance of inconsistency, it can make it even worse. One of the really interesting things that the authors here talk about is using Emma Watson as an example of someone who has had to deal with this kind of ambiguity between her virtue and her agency. And a lot of that is because of the Goody Two Shoes nature of Hermione Granger in Harry Potter's, which when she was a child, she portrayed on film. And so that Goody Two Shoes type and that legacy has followed Miss Watson even into her adult endeavors, working with a variety of groups and her feminist activities, and being a spokesperson for causes. So there have been a lot of that, and so they talk a little bit about that too after this, to give some cases with also folks like Greta Thunberg and Malaya Yousafzai and others. So I thought it was a really fascinating look at exactly how sometimes Goody Two Shoes isn't just they're smug, but also can lead into such a darkness and despair among people who are forcing their anger onto other people. Well, I thought this was a great phrase to research, because I didn't know about the children's book that really took this term to a wide audience. And I love that the book followed such a nice and kind woman. Unfortunately, kindness is not always admired in our world. And that frustration with others really shines through with the phrase. And I think that's the main reason I don't use this phrase. It's just too negative for me. Even if I mean it in a fun or joking way, there's just too many examples of it being turned on people and, going down a really negative place that it's got too much baggage for me. So it's not a phrase I use, but I really enjoyed being able to research it. Well, that's about all we have for today. If you have any thoughts on the show or pop culture references we should have included, reach out to us on Patreon. That's patreon.com/bunnytrailspod, or comment on our website, bunnytrailspod.com.
It's poll time. Recently, we asked our patrons which one would help you more in your life now, being able to always know the answer or being able to always tell the perfect story. This had about 2/3 of our patrons at always tell the perfect story. Heather said, quote, very often in life, there's not one single the answer, so I'd much rather be able to spin the perfect yarn, end quote. JGP added, quote, I fear that always knowing the right answer could be a problem because you'd always know with 100% certainty how many people were misspeaking, whether they were doing it deliberately or not. And that would be so frustrating, end quote. I agree.
Yeah, always being able to tell the perfect story, I think, would come in handy since I do lectures and speaking engagements, oftentimes many times a month. So that one all appeals to me just in general. I think to add to JGP's point, I would become absolutely unbearable to live with or to be around if I always knew the right answer.
And Jan made a good point on the other side, though. Quote, I just changed careers and don't really have a feel for things yet. Always knowing the answer would help greatly right now. End quote. That could definitely be useful in certain situations for sure.
Oh, absolutely. Shauna, where do you land on this?
Oh, I think that probably, I'm probably in the know the answer side of that. I like information, so that would be yeah.
Yeah. So you and Jan on that side. I wondered because you have always, for most of the time I've known you, had a passion for telling stories. So I wonder if the fact that you already tell very good stories is like, it's like, well, I'm already pretty decent at that. So maybe I want to do this other thing because you are always seeking that knowledge. So yeah, I wondered which way you'd come down on that, and I wasn't sure.
It's a little bit tough to decide, honestly.
Yeah, it's totally fair.
Well, if you want to take part in our silly polls, head over to the Patreon. We'd love to hear your take on our weekly poll questions, and it's free at patreon.com/bunnytrailspod. Thank you for joining us. We'll talk to you again next week. Until then, remember,
Words belong to their users.